All right, welcome to the Teflon Tales. As I was telling Trenika as the countdown timer was happening, hey, I should probably get some music or start doing some karaoke next time. So welcome, Trenika Fields Smith. Welcome to the Teflon Tales.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Glad to host you. So I'm going to talk about your official title. So you are legal counsel at Splunk. You're also a 2020 40 under 40 Nation's Best Advocates Award. That's the surface. We're going to go a lot deeper. But let's start with something that, or somebody that connected you and me. So big shout out to Aisha Prakash, another wonderful.
Yay!
Thanks, Aisha, for being a wonderful connector and connecting Trinika and me. So I want to start with a podcast that I was listening that you were featured on. And it was Switch Pivot or Quit podcast. Amazing podcast, by the way. I know, a good friend of yours.
Yes.
So one of the things that you were talking about at age 15, where you had the ability to, while still being in school, to understand what college is like. And so for me, I was like thinking to myself, this is amazing, right? Because lots of people are like, hey, I'm going to go to college, and they have no idea what it is. So talk about what you were doing and how that helped you kind of prepare for the future.
Yeah, actually, well, I actually want to take it a step further back, actually, when I was 13,
Okay.
which was my first introduction to college. I had an amazing mentor at the time in junior high. There was a program through the school where they basically got a couple of students who they believed had talent. And so they partnered us with mentors who went to the local college there, the local university, UC Berkeley. And so I was paired with this amazing mentor, Angelique. I'll never forget her, a young African American woman. And I remember I had no idea what college was like at all. And I remember she showed me that side, and going to her home, visiting her parents. They lived in, at the time, the Oakland Hills, and being a young Black girl from the south side of Berkeley, California, I didn't know that Black people even lived in the Oakland Hills at the
Yeah.
time. And so she actually introduced me to a life where I didn't believe that was possible, right?
Mhm.
And it was one of those things where you don't visualize what you don't see.
Yeah.
And so being able to tap into that very early on really was the catalyst for me wanting to go to college. And I think there's a pivotal moment in every young person's life. There's a point where, usually in their adolescence, right? Where there's a time, there's a defining moment, whether you're going to go left or right.
Yeah.
And he definitely was that right for me. And so going back to your initial question, 15 was my first introduction. Working at 15 at the time through a nonprofit organization called Young Adult Project, where they actually found work for local students that were in underprivileged communities. And so I worked at UC Berkeley. So it was like a full circle moment. So from 13 to 15, I got the opportunity to actually work at UC Berkeley in their architecture building. And so making $4.25 an hour at the time, I thought I was balling. But yeah, that was my first introduction into college. And from then on, I knew that that was my path to success, college.
Wow. So we're going to fast forward to something that you and I share, right? And we're just talking about this before we hit live, which is layoffs. I've
Yes.
been laid off 3 times in my career, right? And as you and I were discussing, those were the defining moments. It's very hard, and
Yes.
obviously, your whole personality, your self worth, everything comes into question. Yet, going back to the Teflon tales, which is really about showcasing how Teflon like we can be, right? Which is being non-sticky, getting back on your feet, getting hot again, cooling down from what you were doing yesterday to what you're doing today. So talk about what those 3 experiences taught you and how that, again, coming back to, I love the analogies that you had, which is, hey, you come to points in your life where you got to make choices, right? So what choices did you make at each point, and how has that helped you shape who you are today?
Yeah, so going to the first time I was laid off, I worked really hard at the time to become a paralegal. I knew that law school was always on the horizon for me, but paralegal was a route for me to take in order to make sure that I was ready to go into law school. And so I worked extremely hard after graduating from college and had an opportunity to tap into this paralegal program, which actually was a 2-year program, but I finished in a year. That's how ambitious I was. And I finally got a role within the company I was currently working with at the time in their home office. And so I transferred as their corporate paralegal. And I kid you not, Ash, when it was crazy because I knew that there was a layoff coming, but I didn't think it would affect me because I was working directly for the general counsel at the time. So I'm seeing all of these severance packages, right, coming through, not thinking that I was going to be one of those individuals until I was called into the office. And so when I got the first notice about the layoff, I was told that I was young at the time and that I was going to bounce back. And he was right. I really did bounce back really quickly. And from that first lesson, I learned that delay is not a denial, right? And that these are lesson learned. These are things that you have to go through in life. If you are a person out there that haven't experienced a layoff, God bless you. But for me, it was one of those things that I had to experience very early on. And so after that, I got another job, amazing company working for International Coffee and Tea Leaf. Worked there for about a year and a half and got laid off again.
Wow.
And so it was like, what is going on? And like you said, it's one of those things where it does, in a way, mess with your ego. Am I doing something wrong? What could I have done better to be a better employee for this company? All types of things go through your mind. But I took that as a negative because most people could think that would be a negative as a positive. And it was my way of saying, hey, this is an opportunity for me to now reapply to law school.
Wow.
And so I did that. That was the time for me to do it.
Okay, so I'm taking a deep breath right now because we're going to go to something that arguably shook me more than anything else ever shaken me in decades, right? And I know you've talked about this publicly and you're really transparent and vulnerable about it, but I think the reason I won't even kind of go there is you are a role model for somebody who's looking to get past setbacks, getting into that mode of resilience, right? So share whatever you feel comfortable, but I really want to kind of hear from you how you've been able to come through such trauma and be able to bootstrap yourself and get to where you are today.
Yeah. So my first introduction to the law was not, learning about law schools. It was actually at the age of 5. My mother was brutally murdered in front of me at the age of 5. And that was actually my first introduction to the law. I actually had to testify um, in court because I was a witness to the act. The individual that took my mother's life was an estranged boyfriend that she no longer was with, and she no longer wanted to be with him. And so he felt that if he could not have her, no one else could. And so he climbed through the kitchen window and stabbed my mother 43 times in front of me. And so I, again, going through the court system very early on, at the time, not knowing the difference between life and death. What does a 5-year-old know, right? And so that has been something that has hunted me for a long time, understandably so. In fact, you and I spoke offline. I actually had to go to a parole hearing for the individual. He is still currently in prison. So, I've always thought that, it is my duty to advocate on my mother's behalf and be her voice. She's no longer here and I will continue to do so as long as I'm here. And a lot of people, I think, would take that in one or two ways, right? Society probably had basically wrote me off, and so with the grace of God and an amazing family, that made sure that I had the right therapy, and kept her presence alive, I was able to move on in life. And so I've taken the tragedy in my life and turn it into a positive. And that's the way that I continue to honor her legacy.
Kudos to you for that. Like I said, it's hard to even imagine. But again, going forward, and the other thing that you're really engaged in is helping others, right?
Yeah.
And the pay it forward. So talk a little bit about how that has helped you, and then what sorts of encounters have you had of people who are, I wouldn't say wallowing in self-pity, but really concerned about their being, and just listening and being with you has helped them come through.
Yeah, so I won't say that I'm invincible, but I will say, because I have encountered such a horrific experience very early on, that there's nothing I can't do. And I try to instill that into people that I mentor, people that I engage with. And so my way of telling my story is a pathway to get them to be vulnerable as well, and is transparent, and actually create their own narrative, right? And so my serving, mentorship, and sitting on boards for an amazing organizations like Kate's Club, where it's an organization that provides grief support for children who have lost a parent, sibling, or loved one, to help them understand that you do not have to be defined by your circumstances, that there is more life than where you've come from.
So one of the defining characteristics of Teflon, if I can get my grammar right, is is being able to cool down as quickly as you get heated up, right? And again, given the number of pivots that you've had to do in your career, and having gone through layoffs, both of us, there's always this ability to transform, right? But that also comes with not a negative, but it also comes with costs, which is you have to be trying a lot of things constantly, right?
Yes. Yes.
And how have you kept your mental well-being while realizing that, hey, you and I could be redundant tomorrow, and therefore we need to kind of be thinking about the next thing? So how have you maintained mental balance while trying to remain relevant?
Some people call it their personal board of directors. I call it my circle. So it's very imperative that I have an amazing group of people, individuals around me. We mentioned Aisha Prakash earlier. I can think of another one, Jennifer Leggio, who was not only a mentor, but was a sponsor for me. She's a CMO at a tech company, and both professionally and personally. I think of the amazing podcast you heard, Switch, Pivot, or Quit, which is an amazing girlfriend of mine, and Yana Deldrich, who's an entrepreneur. So all of these amazing women that I've had in my life, not only do I hold them accountable, but they hold me accountable as well, both personally and professionally. And so you're in an environment professionally, in a career, especially being a woman of color, there's a lot of politics at play that we don't usually like to talk about. It's almost taboo in a sense, but there's a game at the end of the day that you have to play, whether you want to or not, right? And so being able to have those individuals in my life to bounce ideas off of, how do I navigate this space, and also how do I lean in, right? What is it that I need to do? Because a lot of women, if you will, sometimes we don't necessarily think about, once we've acquired a certain status professionally, we don't think about, how do I continue to invest in myself? Because there's more work to do, right? And so I don't want to be just the person that's wearing the nice clothes, right? I want to be the person that's helping others come to the table, right? How do we create diversity in these workspaces? And I think that's how companies can be successful, right? I think that a lot of companies, what they lack is a diverse group of individuals, right? Diverse backgrounds, diverse ways of thinking, right? These are ways in which companies are successful today. So yeah, making sure I have that core circle for sure.
So that leads me to my next question, which is, and again, I'll just call out tech because you and I both are in tech, right?
Yes.
Whether it's large companies or small companies, right? The definition of who you are in tech is usually revolves around, hey, what kind of pedigree do you have? What skill sets do you bring, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't talk about being vulnerable. It
Yeah.
doesn't talk about being open so that you can actually receive feedback that matters, right? So for somebody in that space, like who's gone through the years building their persona, and it has to be defined by their accolades, their number of I don't know, degrees or title, salary, and so forth. How does he or she now suddenly be more open so that they can also benefit from as well as give back to this circle of givers?
Yeah, I think it's so important. And I didn't, honestly speaking, I didn't learn this very early on in my career, but being in not only the tech space, but just being a working individual, period, I think there's strength in being vulnerable and being transparent, being authentic to who you are. I think people are more receptive of a person that is willing to say, you know what, I don't know. And one of the great things that my husband always tells me, we go back and forth and we have these deep conversations. We talk about it all the time. You know what you know, and what you don't know, you will learn. And so, going back to just, improving your skill sets. And, for me, I always want to continue to evolve, right? I never want to be the individual that I've reached a plateau and there's nowhere else for me to go. Right. My goal is to continue to evolve. And so for those around me, those who I encounter or mentor, the saying speaks true. You never want to be the smartest person in a room. You want to continue to evolve, for sure.
So again, going back to one of the Teflon attributes, which is being non-sticky, right? And this is a hard one because you have to show up at work, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're an employee, doesn't matter, with your best self every single day. And yet, as you and I know, having gone through layoffs, this could be a last day at work, right? So you could have this mentality of saying, hey, I'm expandable anyways, let me do the minimum possible. Or you can go through this like why me thing after giving so much. So how do you maintain that be getting hot, being effective, and yet remaining non-sticky?
Yeah, well, I think we're all human. The last layoff I had last year during the pandemic, actually. So my third layoff during the pandemic. I think initially you are like, why me? It's only human, right? Like, oh my God, what did I do wrong again? But you could take it one way or the other, and I decided to embrace it. It was definitely the time that I needed. I really didn't feel like I had a work-life balance, unfortunately. And so it was a time for me to actually refresh, rejuvenate, and re-energize. And I took it head on. I listened to different podcasts. I, took the opportunity to look at different conferences. I took the opportunity to do some additional professional development to get ready for that next career opportunity, because I knew it was eventually going to come, right? And so, again, you want to continue to brush up on those skill sets, and, drown out the noise. I think that social media can be a great thing, but it also can leave a negative impact on individuals, right? It's hard to escape all of these social media outlets and what we see on social media. We see the end result, right? And so a lot of us think that, okay, they did it. Why am I not there? What am I doing wrong? And so you have to have what I call tunnel vision, have those blinders on. When you go to the race show and you see those horses, they have blinders on. And although it's easier said than done, you have to do that in order to stay focused and committed to your journey, because your journey is different from the next person's journey.
Wow. Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground. So final question, right? Again, going back to what you've been through in life, if you were to kind of have to give guidance to somebody who is just starting their career, right? Like what attributes would you say, hey, these are the things that you need to? So that's the first part of the question. Second part of the question is, hey, somebody who's kind of in that mode of I've been the single trick pony through my life. COVID has taught anything is like, hey, everything is fair game for becoming redundant tomorrow. So pieces of advice for somebody who's getting into a new profession and somebody who's been there for a while in terms of what they need to do. Again, you just touched upon it briefly with your experience last year, but anything that you can share with them in terms of how they can restart.
Yeah. So I would say for anyone who's been in the workforce, I call it the second mountain. This is the opportunity to dive into what is your purpose. I think when we first start out in our careers, we're focused on the accolades. We're focused on, the compensation that we're getting, right? And so at this point in my life, I was focused on the purpose. How can I make an impact, not only to the company, but to those around me, to the world even? And so those are things that will stand the test of time that, it may sound crazy, but it's more valuable than your compensation. Money is great, right? But, what do you want to leave when God decides to take you off this earth? What type of legacy do you want to leave? And for those who are just starting out in their career, I would say, you know what? Get lost in the journey, but at the same time, remain present. I think that what COVID has allowed us to do is to really focus on where we are. There's no competition around you. You're running your own race. It's not a race, it's a marathon, right? So get lost in the journey. Find those opportunities, different opportunities that get you going. What drives you? If you don't feel passionate or motivated about it, it's not the right thing to do, right? So get lost in the journey, and again, just remain present. And I would also have to say, for me, the journey has been a lot of ebbs and flows. There's a lot of losses, there's a lot of gains. For instance, losing my mom, but what I've gained in that experience is the will to continue to fight, the will to continue to push forward, the will to succeed. And life is not guaranteed, and you only have one life to live. So live it the best way possible. And no matter what, just keep going. There's a gospel group, Mary Mary, and there's a song I love. It's called "I'm Walking." So no matter what adversity, no matter what obstacle I'm facing, I am still walking.
Wow. Yeah, as you were speaking, I could also remember that, I mean, the journey that you started on may not be the journey you end up on. So the part that you mentioned about the forks in the road and being able to realize there's a fork and change along the way, right? And
yes.
Great conversation again. I appreciate you not just coming on the show, but also sharing and being vulnerable, more so as a way for others to understand and learn from your journey and be able to renew themselves. So again, thanks to Trenika for the great conversation.
Thank you for having me, Ashwin. Thank you so much. Truly honored to be here.
Thank you.